I think that one problem is that, for instance, my grandpa, when I tried to tell him in 20, when I was after college, when I was staying in Kauai about the shoe machine, he didn't really believe me that it was a problem. And a part of it, I think, is because it took a long time for me to fix my shot. Because even at that point, and even for years after that, I was still shooting the way my dad told me to do with my feet. Now, I wish I could tell you guys what it was that I figured out. I knew that the shoot away machine messed up my shot with looking at the videos because I could see that that was making me shoot with my left foot in front of my right, and it was based off how I was picking the ball up off the rack, and I can see how I was shooting like I was picking the ball off of the rack. But it took me until I was playing with Compton College in 2019 to really decipher what was how to shoot correctly. So I started really studying the videos of when I was younger, and I started really moving into shots the way that I saw in the videos. I wish I had more videos. And I also started shooting with my feet different than the way that my dad told me to. And that's when I really started figuring out my shot. And a part of that was the coach told me to shoot that way. And I started looking at the videos of when I was younger, and I started seeing, oh, that is how I used to shoot. And I fixed things up, and that was in 2019. So it took me a long time to figure that out. And I wish I had more videos, but I'll get more to that later. But as I described in about 2010, I discovered the quadrant model. And then around like 2011, 2012, during that period, that was when I was in college, and I ended up graduating with a psychology degree. But I mentioned that one thing that was difficult about that time was I had lost a lot of videos of when I was younger, and I quit basketball at UCSD in 2010, and that was about the time when I started looking at videos and I started seeing, oh, it was a shooting machine that messed up my shot, that messed up my game, and that's when I started trying to fix it. And I also, at that time, I'm not going to get into details about this, but I lost a swag flow. I'm not going to get into details about that, but I lost that because I was looking at the videos and I became aware of it. And when I became aware of it, I lost it. I'm not going to go into details about that, but I wanted more videos to study. But I mentioned in 2010, when my parents came to pick me up from school, I showed them the quadrant model. They didn't believe it. And I lost a lot of videos at that time. I lost at least 30. And if people could see the videos of when I was 9, me doing the and one moves, doing just amazing moves, my shot was amazing, and I won an AU national championship and all that stuff. If people could see those videos, they would be astonished. But most of the best videos I had were lost. Later, I went to my grandma's house and I got cassettes, and I converted those to DVDs, but a lot of them, reason why they were cassettes and weren't converted in the first place was they weren't the best videos I had. I had incredible videos, but also another thing I forgot to mention was, I think I didn't maybe mention it, but my mom and dad didn't record my games. One, because my dad wanted to watch. My dad went to every one of my games, and he always wanted to watch, and he said he couldn't record and watch at the same time. And my mom has anxiety issues, and she was too afraid to record because she was too afraid to make a mistake. And there was one time I remember she recorded one time when I was in AU Nationals when I was 10, and she missed me making a shot. And I remember I said something like, "Mom, you missed it." But my mom she got so uptight about it because she has anxiety issues. And she never recorded after that again because she was too afraid that she was going to make a mistake. And I was scoring 40s, 50s, and doing amazing stuff. Yet still she didn't record because she was too afraid. It would, be extremely helpful if I had videos because I want to study the swag flow. Number two, I want to study what I did when I was unconscious. And again, it was a shooting machine that screwed up my shot. And I was still unconscious at the time. But then because I was picking the ball off of the rack, I was shooting incorrectly the way I was moving into it. And the way that my dad tried to fix it, he told me to do the wrong thing. And then I'm shooting extremely mechanical. My dad's trying to make me shoot sideways. Then he's trying to make me artificially shoot sideways by picking the ball off the rack and artificially do it, which isn't how good shooters do it. And anyways, that's what made everything deteriorate. So, and the reason I bring this up is because my mom and dad, they want to believe that I was the problem, that I had some sort of problem and I became mentally ill or something, and that's what happened. But I'm telling you, if it wasn't for the shooting machine, none of the problems would have happened. I would have continued getting exponentially better. Me and my dad would have stayed close. Everything would have been happy. Everything would have been amazing and all that. But, still in my eyes, everything is amazing. I discovered the theory of everything. I'm doing good. But in my parents' eyes, my mom doesn't believe I discovered the theory of everything. She thinks that she believed that it was not the theory of everything. She thought it was a delusion. So did my dad. And ever since then, they have treated me very demeaningly. And I'm going to get to that. But I want to speak to them. I want to talk to them. I want to reestablish a relationship, but they refuse to. And I'm going to get to that part of the story. So this is college. And as I was talking in the previous lecture, I was talking a lot in college with my grandpa, and I was trying to learn medicine, what I know now is metapsychiatry. At the time, he never really told me it was metapsychiatry. He called it transpersonal psychology. But it took me until 2020 to read Dr. Hora's book, Existential Metapsychiatry, to understand what my grandpa was saying. My grandpa studied under Dr. Hora and got a PhD as a transpersonal psychologist, studying under him. But I'll kind of go more into details about the type of stuff that I was learning with my grandpa at that time. So this is in college, and like I said, I was very liberal, and in my opinion, I was kind of anti-white. But the way that my grandpa taught was, as I was mentioning, he would teach, for instance, like the paradoxes of, sex. Sex is self-confirmatory, because when you're having sex, it's bringing sensations to your body, and it's confirming the illusion of you having a separate body. But there is no self, according to my grandpa. There is no self. Everything is one. He says everything's energy. Dr. Horace said everything's a hologram. So you're just a hologram. So there is no thing. But regardless, it's the same concept. If you're having sex, it's self-confirmatory. But at the same time, my grandpa would say there's a higher aspiration behind the aberration of sex. And that is to gain oneness with someone else, perhaps, or, by increasing your level of aliveness, you can lose yourself. And that's the flow, and losing yourself. So it can be self-confirmatory, but also a form of self-transcendence. But as I was saying, I was very liberal at this time, and I was kind of suspicious of my grandpa because he seemed like I couldn't tell if he was liberal or not. And one thing he was he would teach me that Jesus was real man, and he really performed miracles. My grandpa said that Jesus understood everything is energy, and he could therefore manipulate the energy, and he could turn water to wine because he recognized it's just different formations of energy, and he could manipulate the formations of energy to create wine. And that's the way my grandpa saw it. But the way that I kind of perceived things was, I never told my grandpa this, and I pretended like I believed in the in the stories of the Bible, but in my mind I thought it was just mythologies, and I thought it was fake. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to just completely obliterate religion, because one thing is I saw religion as white supremacist. This is me in college, and I thought like the whole point of religion was to divide people. And I thought that it was like, especially Christianity, what it was it's an excuse for what I thought was white people to put up borders and maintain white supremacy by saying, okay, we're Christians and we don't want Muslims in here, but really it's just we don't want brown people in here. So let's make borders, and that's the way that I viewed it. Now I don't necessarily see, I think that maybe that is an aspect of it, but I don't necessarily think it's negative to have borders. But at that time, I did, because it's not because I don't think it was because I really was like very compassionate and wanted everyone to just be like one and everyone to be harmonious. I think it's because, and I think the white supremacists are right on this front, is I saw myself as Jewish, and I kind of didn't like white people as much because I saw the white people as kind of bad. And there's that stereotype among the white supremacists that Jews want to race mix people. And I think that was true with me. Like, I was really gravitated toward the ideologies that were liberal and kind of leftist, and I do think that I did kind of, in a sense, promote, like in my mind, I wanted race mixing. I wanted the white people to mix with the darker races, and I saw white people as kind of bad. And even though like people ironically would say like, well, Ryan, you're white, but I didn't see myself that way. I saw myself as Jewish, and I didn't see myself as white. And and like I said, I think that that's a part of the reason why I was so into basketball and so into rap music and stuff, because I was kind of anti-white. And the way I saw religion itself was, I thought that religion was a form of white supremacy. Like, I thought that like one big part of religion is, morality and upholding morality. And I thought that morality was, in a sense, just a way to maintain the status quo. And I didn't like the status quo because I thought it was white supremacist. So, like, just one example of that would be like, religions would be against stealing. But I was kind of, in my opinion, I was a communist. Like, the way that I look at myself back in the day, back when I was in college, and I really was a communist. Like, I was what the people stereotypically look at, the white supremacists when they talk about the Jews being communists and being for race mixing. I was that. I know that. So, like, I was, um, like, I would look at something like stealing, and how religions would be against stealing. And I would think, well, that's just a form of white supremacy to maintain property in the hands of the elites or in the hands of the white people, and to keep the darker races down. And I thought that, in my opinion, stealing would be okay, and I wanted a Marxist revolution. That's the way I saw it. And I didn't like the status quo. I wanted everything to be overturned. I was a communist. Essentially, I was a Marxist. And, like, the same thing with so, like, even like sex and stuff. Like, the way that I saw it was, I would look at the people who were like very rigid against, promiscuity and like sex and stuff. And I saw my grandpa kind of in this light, because my grandpa, like I said, he believed in Jesus, but there were parts of him that I did like. Like, I liked that he didn't believe that Jesus was God. My grandpa would say he didn't have any belief. Like, he'd be open to just inspiration. He didn't want to be attached to any belief, so he could be open to the flow and the truth. And he didn't really explain that very well. Like I just explained, it took me a long time to understand his teachings, but I liked some things my grandpa would say, because he seemed like a little bit liberal, and he seemed to be non-religious in senses. Like, he'd be for science and stuff. And I liked that, because I was against religion. I wanted to upturn and subvert religion, because I saw it as white supremacist. I saw it as dividing people and maintaining white supremacy and keeping the white, like Christianity. I thought that it kept white people separate from, the Muslims who are brown. And I wanted religion just to be annihilated so that everyone would mix. I think that that's what I wanted, especially the white people. I wanted the white people to mix. Like, I was against the southern border of Mexico and stuff. And like, I was very leftist. So, but like, yeah, like promiscuity, my grandpa would say it's not existentially valid. And he would say it's self-confirmatory. And when he would say this type of stuff, I would think, well, I think you're kind of a white supremacist, because I was always listening to rap music, and rap music was kind of extols promiscuity and anti-morality, and like having sex with a lot of girls and doing that type of stuff. And I kind of followed my grandpa's teachings, but at the same time, like, I was very leftist. I was for pornography. I was for abortion. And when I heard people who would be like, I'm not for pornography, I'm not for abortion, I'm not for women's rights, quote unquote, right? I would look at them and I would think to myself, they're white supremacists, because I thought they just want to maintain the status quo. They want to make babies for white people. I would look at them like, yeah, they're just basically want to make women into baby makers, and they want to control women, because I thought it was like a Darwinian thing in a sense, like because they want to maintain the white race. And I was a leftist, and I told you I was anti-white, and I wanted the white race to be dissolved, kind of. And that's why I think that the people who say like, and I think it was because I saw myself as Jewish, and so, and I don't want to say that every Jewish person is that way, or even like every person of color or every liberal is that way, but I was that way. So I know that the white supremacists who think that about Jews, a lot of them have accurate discernment in a lot of cases, not in all cases. There can be someone who's liberal, like even my grandpa would say, like, if you're in the flow, maybe sometimes you could be for abortion if you recognize, I guess when you're in the flow, you can recognize all the variables, and you can say like, okay, well, in this society, at this moment, a lot of women, if they don't have the right to abortion, they're going to kill themselves through illegal abortion. So let's make it legal just to protect women in this sense. But my grandpa, even he would say though, but everything is one, and you don't want to have abortions. Number one, because everything is one, and like the baby, the fetus, you don't want to kill an insect if you see everything is one. Number one. Number two, my grandpa would say promiscuity is not existentially valid. And he would say that a lot of abortions are the result of promiscuity. So, but when I was in college, I remember when I would see people who would be like anti-women's rights, anti that type of stuff, I would think white supremacists. I didn't like them. And if I saw a black person who was like that, I would still think the guy's a white supremacist. Like I remember I had a teammate who had a mom who was white and his dad was black, but his dad was a pastor and he was a Christian pastor and he was against abortion and he was against like women's rights. And I remember I would think to myself, yeah, well, this guy's, he might seem black, but he has a white mom. He's a white supremacist and he just wants to maintain the status quo. And that's the way that I viewed things. But I wouldn't say that to people. Like I never let anybody know I was anti-white. I never expressed that. But in my mind, that's the way that I was. And I was, I was basically a communist. I was anti-nationalist. I was very communist. I wanted to dissolve borders. And I do think I was anti-white. I wanted to mix white people. That was the way that I saw things. So I think to myself, yeah, the supremacists, quote unquote, are sometimes accurate in that sense, because I know that I was that way. So I was very much liberal, very leftist, communist, pretty much. And so when my grandpa would be saying these things that were kind of seemed a little bit right-wing, like he's not for promiscuity, he's against pornography. He wouldn't say he's against it, but he would say, yeah, it's not existentially valid. And when he would say, these types of things, or that, promiscuity is not existentially valid and it doesn't lead to happiness and stuff. And I would think to myself, yeah, I'm a little suspicious of him because he seems like a little bit of a Nazi, like a little bit right-wing. And I didn't like right-wing. And I think it was because I identified as Jewish. So I wasn't even aware of what my grandpa was saying about how your ego can cloud your vision. My ego at that time was clouding my vision. And I'm not saying that I was necessarily even completely wrong. I wasn't necessarily right or wrong, but I am aware that the identity that I held to was funneling the way that I saw existence and the way that I participated in reality. So my grandpa's teaching me metapsychiatry in a sense. And again, like I kind of liked his teachings because they were kind of seemed anti-Christian and anti-religious, because he would seem scientific, like everything is energy, seems kind of scientific. But at the same time, he believes Jesus was a real man and he did all these miracles and stuff. And I wanted to kind of believe Jesus was just a mythical figure because in a sense, I wanted to dissolve religion because I saw religion as white supremacist. And then the other thing was like my grandpa, he was very into like working hard. So as I said, I asked him like, well, why do you think Jews won so many Nobel Prizes? And he said, well, it's because they're a minority and they felt like they need to work harder in order to prove themselves and stuff. And it's not necessarily because of intelligence. But my grandpa's an existentialist. He would say that, and it took me till 2020 to realize this, to really understand this. But as an existentialists say you don't want to blame anybody for anything. And you just want to take responsibility for everything. So my grandpa would say you can't to blame God is not existentially valid, or to blame society and stuff. It's not existentially valid. It's not what existentialists do. Existentialists just say, you know what? I take full responsibility. And that's supposed to give anxiety. That's why existentialists say, like, they talk about anxiety and existential angst and stuff, because they're not blaming anybody and they're not, giving away their responsibility and their sense of autonomy. They're saying, I'm responsible for my actions, and I'm not gonna, give that up for anybody. And I'm not gonna say it's my genes that's responsible. I'm not gonna say it's because of society or anything. I'm responsible. So my grandpa would say, you can't change other people. You can't change other people. All you can do is change yourself, and all you can do is just work hard and just go all out. And, that's a part of the flow. And I understand that, like he would say, and I understand this aspect of the flow, like the more you study, the more awareness you get, and the more you become receptive to inspiration and insights, and that's a part of the flow. And a part of the flow is not becoming attached and ossified and rigid, but it's a flexibility and being able to take from everywhere. I understand that would be the flow, like learn from everything and be able to then, through the synergy of everything that you learn, develop insights and inspired thoughts and stuff like that. And that would be the flow. And so I understand what my grandpa's saying, but he would talk about like, all you can do is work hard. And I remember when he would talk so much about how working hard is important, I remember I even thought to myself, seems a little white supremacist, because I thought how white supremacists would talk about, like, yeah, you just have to, we work so hard, and that, it's not privilege. We just work harder. And the way that I saw it was, I was kind of a communist, and I was like, no, really, a lot of reality has to do with privilege. It has to do with luck. It has to do with what family you're born into. It has to do with these things that, and working hard might be a little bit overrated. And a lot of it I thought was talent too. Yes, I thought working hard is definitely important, but I thought that he overemphasized that, and I'm definitely not. I wasn't an existentialist. I thought, dude, you say take responsibility for everything, but I thought, no, taking responsibility for everything is not completely accurate. In a lot of ways, outside forces are to blame, like racism, like sexism. So I was very leftist, very communist, and I was not an existentialist like my grandpa, who would not blame. My grandpa would say there is no such thing as racism, there is no such thing as sexism. And again, when he would tell me this, I would think to myself, he's a white supremacist, because I thought that that's like a white supremacist argument, because I thought white supremacists were the ones who were like, yeah, racism doesn't exist. So my grandpa would say it's not that. He would say that some people have predator-prey software, or insider-outsider software, or self-confirmatory dualistic software. And he would say, and people call that racism. But my grandpa would say it's not really racism, it's just that software. And what we call racism is just a result of that software. But you can upgrade your software. And my grandpa would say, if you're in the flow, you would be able to discern the way that things are, as opposed to have, prejudiced views that are distorted. But my point is, though, I was confused. My grandpa was kind of confusing me, and I didn't really understand. And at the time, I didn't really understand that he was an existentialist. I was just really befuddled by everything my grandpa was teaching me. So I'll continue.